If your child has two speeds, wound up 1 minute and completely zoned out the next, this might be the most important thing you hear today. ADHD is not one size fits all. There are actually two very different types we see in practice all the time. The raging bull, constantly moving, emotional, impulsive, and then the drunken bull, spaced out, disconnected, foggy, and exhausted. Most ADHD meds only mask the symptoms, and they definitely do not address the root cause. And then they come with a whole host of nasty side effects, short and long term as well. The truth is, both types of ADHD come from the same place and the same cause. Welcome to the Experience Miracles podcast, where we help parents find hope, answers, and drug-free help to overcome your child's chronic health challenges. I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, and I'll be sharing my experiences as both a dad and a doctor on every episode. I can take the latest science and neurology of healing and break it down in the most simple and relatable way possible. We'll take on the toughest topics and answer your biggest questions through interviews with other amazing parents and leading experts, leaving you with practical action steps that you can take to help your child heal and thrive. It's time to expect and experience miracles. Let's get started. Let me guess, your child doesn't just have one speed, do they? One moment they're bouncing off the wall, shouting, spinning, climbing on furniture, melting down every single time something little doesn't go their way. And the next moment they might be completely zoned out, disconnected, blank stare, can't follow instructions. And it's like they're in the room, but they're not really there. You probably tried the parenting books, the behavior and the reward charts, and maybe even medications or all sorts of supplementation. And you're still left asking, why is my child like this? And how do I actually help them? Here's the truth that no one's telling you. What we label as ADHD or old school ADD is often just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath those labels are two very different nervous system patterns called raging bulls and drunken bulls. And we call them that so we can make sense of the symptoms and everyday challenges that come from them, but also so we can explain to parents what is going on with the nervous system dysregulation patterns that causes the different types of raging bull, wound up, impulsive, hyperactive, or drunken bull, disconnected, hard to follow instructions, and always exhausted. And if you don't really understand which kind of bull is charging through your child's brain and body, you'll keep chasing the wrong solutions. Today, we're breaking down the real neurological root causes of these behaviors and behavior types, and most importantly, we'll show you how hope, healing, and true transformation are possible, all without dangerous drugs and medications. Because your child isn't broken. They don't need more labels. They need answers, they need understanding, and they need a care plan that finally gets it right and addresses the real deepest layer of root cause. Let's dive in. All right, according to the CDC, an estimated 7 million children in the United States have been diagnosed with ADHD, and approximately half of those, so almost 4 million in the US alone, are taking ADHD medications. Now, the top 10 side effects of these medications are a whole host of chronic conditions in and of themselves. Sleep problems, trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, which worsens the behavior and the focus the next day. Appetite suppression, they have a significant decrease in hunger and often lose weight and have nutritional deficiencies. Emotional dysregulation and irritability. That's a literal side effect of these medications. It can cause the conditions it's meant to treat with what's called a rebound effect. Anxiety and nervousness. Now they're constantly worried, restless, and even get panic attacks that didn't even have anxiety issues, but the medications can kick them out. Tics and involuntary movements. I see this all the time with stimulant medications. Headaches and persistent tension in their neck and in their shoulders and in their head. See this all the time too. Stomach pain, digestive discomfort, increased blood pressure and heart rate. Did you know that most of these medications come with a black box warning for cardiovascular, so heart issues? And then over time, especially, one of the biggest side effects is social withdrawal or zombie-like behavior. And that's, I would say that's the biggest challenge parents have. Oh goodness, it's hard to say that the others before this aren't the exact things parents do not want. But when I really sit down knee to knee with parents, which is what we do completely differently as doctors who help kids not treat or cure ADHD or ADD, but actually address the root cause and get to the other side where it goes from a struggle to a superpower, which we're going to talk a ton about in this one. But when I sit down knee to knee with parents and I ask them what they really do want and what they really don't want when it comes to taking care of their kiddos' challenges, what they absolutely do not want is to lose their ADHD, ADD child's creativity, expressiveness, empathy, awesomeness. And that's what medications do. So often, even when they work to suppress the symptoms that maybe we don't want, the inattentiveness or getting in trouble in school, they give us a whole lot of things we do not want. And perhaps the biggest, worstest one is when it takes that child's awesome, incredible, God-given personality away and turns them into that medicated, straitjacketed, shut down, zombie-like kid instead. If there's one thing, and I'll say it one more time, that parents are just like, never that, we don't want that. That's the one thing. So I want you to listen all the way through this one because we're going to break down the two different types of ADHD, which is really kind of, we're going to go back old school. I've been in practice for a while. So we're going to talk about ADHD versus ADD, even though nowadays in the medical drug dealing system, they technically say there's just 6 different types of ADHD. They just like to complicate things because it seems like the more that they can complicate things, the more that they can medicate things. And we don't like to complicate anything, and we definitely are not in the business of medication. And so what we're going to do is get sciencey and get into the actual root cause, nervous system dysregulation, and overactive fight or flight system, a suppressed what's called vagus nerve. We're going to get very neurological and root cause here, but we'll keep it very simple so you know exactly how to address your child's challenges, whether they are that raging bull ADHD type or the drunken bull ADD type, or as you'll see when we get a bit into this, one can become the other. And the most common cases we take in our clinic and under PX Docs care is when it's a little bit of both. Most are usually a predominant type, one or the other. But when you really dig in, and again, dive deeper than most doctors do, you'll see that most kiddos struggle with some of the extra raging bull stuff. But then over time, if that root cause isn't addressed, they can kind of fall into or go into the drunken bull exhausted type as well. So the biggest issue with medications is they do not address the root cause, which is a stressed, dysregulated nervous system. And so not only do they not address the root cause, it just leads to a cycle of chasing symptoms for the digestive issues, the motor tics, the sleep and anxiety challenges. And so that's what we find is the medical hamster wheel that parents today, most of the time, never even want to get on. But if they did get on that, they can't wait to get off. Okay, real quick before we get quite a few layers deeper into the science behind these challenges, let's just look at the evolution of the terminology or the diagnostic criteria. Now, again, when I first got into practice, things were simpler, and we want to get ourselves back to that, where we're just looking at it from two types, really a third when you combine them, but that's what it was. You had the ADHD, and then you had ADD. And when you really did look deeper, you could see that most kiddos, most people, by the way, this is really an adult conversation as well. Many of us struggle with this stuff, and the same science and the same drug-free help exists for adults with ADHD or ADD challenges as well. Or there's that third type, the combined type. Now, what's crazy is the DSM, the diagnostic manual, which is like, okay, plug in your symptoms, then you get this condition, and then you get this medication. Like, that's the business of medicine. It's just a spreadsheet, okay? There's no test for ADHD. There's no blood work. And even if it was blood work, by the way, ADHD isn't a chemical imbalance. It's a neurological imbalance first that causes a chemical imbalance. And if you hear that and you're like, whoa, cowboy, I've heard the science behind ADHD is super clear. It has to do with dopamine and all these other sort of neurotransmitters. Pause with me for a second. Neurotransmitters. Those chemicals transmit messages for the nervous system. They're just doing what the nervous system tells it to do. So if the nervous system is imbalanced and dysregulated, and overstressed and overreactive, like we're going to talk about next, well then yes, it's going to imbalance the neurotransmitters. So as usual with medicine, even when they kind of go one layer deeper, they're not even close to the deepest layer. They're just dealing with the middleman with neurotransmitters when they chemically manipulate those with medications. So that whole thing, the chemical imbalance theory, has been debunked. It's what I always like to say, it's not inaccurate science, but it's incomplete. So if you'd like information about how truly the chemical imbalance theory is not exactly fully scientific and has been quite debunked, and really, again, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's part of the conversation. Nervous system, neurotransmitters, symptoms and conditions and physiological function or dysfunction in this case if it gets too far. But just reach out and we'll give you that information as well. So let's go back to our raging bull and drunken bull analogy. When I first got into practice, what I found is very important, and this may be, it may sound like if your child doesn't struggle with ADHD or ADD, if you've never had a kiddo who gets a specific diagnosis, then this maybe won't land as strong or seem as important. But trust me, I myself have gone through life with a thriving category of ADHD. I'm a raging bull. I thank God for it every single morning in my prayers. But because I have neurologically focused chiropractic and the things we're going to cover here that really turn what would be a struggle. I couldn't fall asleep. I couldn't pay attention in school. I couldn't wear certain clothes because the sensory issues that really fuel ADHD were there. So trust me, I struggled in a lot of places in my life because of quote unquote ADHD for 20 years. But now, because I've got my nervous system, my vagus nerve and my nervous system balanced again, my, as medicine would call it, ADHD, raging bull type, is the biggest blessing and the biggest gift I have from God, because I can go fast on the gas pedal, but because my nervous system is also regulated, I can also handle corners and handle transitions really well, which ADHD sensory kids can't. I can slow down and use my brakes when I need to. And that's where we're going to get with this. And so when I got into practice, what I found is, goodness gracious, for these kids and these families, medicine has done no testing. They haven't even pretended to look for the root cause. They oftentimes, parents would say, they didn't even, like my kid wasn't even there. They didn't, and if they were, they didn't look at the kid. They just had me fill out some surveys, some questionnaires. Now, actually, I think a lot of this just exists online. And within 8 minutes, the pediatrician or the neurologist would just say, hey, here's this medication. And if you want to just, I just want to run this story out a little bit further. I've been in practice a long time, and it still happens. It's just a bit more covert. But I used to meet a few neurologists and different parents who worked for them, different nurse practitioners and office schedulers here in my area. And one mom told me one time, she goes, I can tell you which neurologist a child with ADHD is seeing if you tell me which medication they're on, because each neurologist basically just got bought out by a drug company back in the day. And it wasn't like, oh, this medication is best for your specific type. Like there was no real doctoring or science to it. It was just, oh, here's your symptoms. Well, for me in my office, this drug rep told me, or sold me, really is probably a better way to say it. And so that's how that works. Now, you may think, goodness gracious, that's going deep into it. Yeah, parents, kids, we deserve to know this, how much the pharmaceutical medical system really took over. And that's why very few people get real answers as to what the real root cause of ADHD is, because the medications don't even pretend to go there. The neurotransmitter thing, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, is as loosely constructed of a cause as it can get. It's just incomplete. So we decided that the most helpful thing we could do in the initial components of care is just redefine some things. And so the Raging Bull and the Drunken Bull are just fun nicknames because it's a pediatric friendly practice, right? So we're just trying to be relatable, not diagnostic. And so relatable is different than a label. And so the Raging Bull kiddo, that's what makes him great. The Raging Bull kiddo often loves, different things at school, mainly recess and PE and those sort of activities. They love video games. They love fast-paced movies. They love going out and talking to everybody and touching everything and being active. So there's actually a lot of traits within this gas pedal expressiveness that can be served well in that child's life. It's not served well sitting in a classroom. That brain, that kind of nervous system is not served well sitting in a classroom where everything goes slow and everything has a certain pace. Now, the Drunken Bull is on the other side of the neurological spectrum. The Drunken Bull doesn't have the overactive sympathetic nervous system, not at that moment anyways. They actually have a slower neurological, what's kind of called communication and signaling system, where as information comes into the nervous system, the processing speed, because the nervous system, it's supposed to travel faster than the speed of light, but when there's this thing we're going to cover next called subluxation in the way, is this certain pattern of subluxation and nervous system tension can either trigger sympathetic dominance, that fight or flight response, that's the Raging Bull, and or subluxation can cause miscommunication. It can cause what we call interference and get in the way of efficient signaling. Have you ever been on a Zoom call? So we used to use phone calls. Now many of us spend a lot of our time with work and everything else on Zoom. You ever been on Zoom when somebody's Wi-Fi isn't working really well? It has a disruption of the signal. And so you can kind of pick up what they're saying and you can kind of hear them while they're glitching. And so that's the ADD brain. That's the Drunken Bull brain. The connection is disrupted via subluxation. So that's all we want you to know about the real root cause of Raging Bull, ADHD, Drunken Bull, ADD, or the combined type. When subluxation, nervous system dysregulation, get into the system, it'll trigger a too overreactive sympathetic fight or flight stress response. And also, it'll create miscommunication and dysfunction and inefficiency of signaling. It'll slow down the processing to the brain. And so all of this ends up in the brain. But it's actually coming from subluxation, often connected to birth trauma. Let me go in order with the perfect storm. High stress pregnancies are pretty strongly correlated with sensory, ADHD, and even autism. Fertility challenges, if I step back even further before that, so high stress fertility challenges usually become high risk sort of pregnancies. But the other thing that is completely overlooked as a root trigger of the root cause of raging bulls and drunken bulls is birth interventions. Forceps, vacuum, C-section, induction. These are strongly correlated. And then that's the child who's colicky, fussy, constipated, gets chronic ear infections. And then this is the final kind of hammer of the perfect storm. Now, when their nervous system is dysregulated and stressed first, it messes with the gut, it messes with the immune system. And now these kiddos get sick all the time and they get antibiotics, which further go into the gut and cause disruption of gut function, which is where neurotransmitters need to be absorbed to keep the brain calm and regulated. And also kids who get sick often when they're little get inhalers and nebulizers, and then they get corticosteroid medications, like those sort of things. And they come with a trigger of the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system. So the final thing I want you to know is that over the course of time, one can become the other. So what we find is that sympathetic, stuck on raging bull kiddo, you can only stay on the gas pedal for so long before your nervous system becomes not only out of balance and wound up, becomes worn out. And so over time, the raging bull, hyperactive toddler and preschooler and kindergartner and grade schooler who was always talking, always moving, always getting in trouble, well, then they become tired neurologically. They become exhausted neurologically. And now they can't focus. Now they can't pay attention. Now they can't do their homework. Now they can't take the test. And so the raging bull becomes the drunken bull. And it goes the other way too. The drunken bull, who struggles with inattentiveness, trouble focusing, trouble processing. The drunken bull often has a lot of motor coordination challenges, so they don't tend to do very well in sports. They lack hand-eye coordination and gross motor, kind of big body coordination. And so they don't get to be involved there, or they don't get to do so well there. So now they're struggling in school. Maybe they're struggling with sports. Also, when you have the drunken bull type, just your social, emotional communication processing can be slower and a bit more disjointed, kind of back to our Zoom analogy. And so it's harder to make friends. And so you can see where this is all going. Now, this drunken bull, everyday challenges start to pile up, and they're very frustrating, and they're very irritating, and they're very angering often. So what we see over the course of neurological progression with life progression of subluxation is the drunken bull often becomes wound up, irritated, angry, raging bull, and often even anxiety as well. So we wanted to do this message for you so that you know, in simple construct, there's raging bulls, there's drunken bulls, and the most common type is the third type, and it kind of depends what stage, what age, what progression of all this there is. But the real answer is getting those neurological insight scans. What we can do with our scanning technology is we can literally measure beneath the surface for nervous system dysfunction and dysregulation. And not only can we find if that subluxation, dysregulation, vagus nerve dysfunction is there, we can actually measure the pattern or the type. The raging bull has the wound up, overstressed scans, but they're actually super organized. They can do a lot in a little bit of time, okay? That's the brilliance of that. And the drunken bull doesn't have too much energy. They have too little. And they have what's called poor pattern and symmetry scores. Their nervous system is disconnected in that way that we're talking about. So getting the insight, getting the understanding of the neuroscience, that's first step for parents. That's what we wanted to do here. Getting the insight scans, that's the second step. And the third step that comes from that, which is so exciting, is all of us PX doctors are trained to adjust accordingly. The raging bull has a very certain adjusting plan and clinical protocol that helps calm and activate the vagus nerve and get them out of sympathetic storm. And the drunken bull gets adjustments that improves efficiency, coordination, and communication within the brain and the nervous system. So take the next step. If you need to continue to learn more than even this one, reach out. We've got more articles, more videos, more podcasts, you name it. If you need to get connected to a doctor who has the scans, go to the directory, go to our website, pxtalks.com, and do that. And if you're already under care and you're looking for more information about, okay, what's the trajectory, what's the timeline, just reach out. We've got some great resources about that one too. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in on this one. Reach out with any questions or any resources you need, and we'll see you on the next one.